Hello and welcome to the start of a very random reading vlog. I finished filming my spring TBR, MBR a few hours ago now, and I have had the desire, the inclination to film a reading vlog for probably the last month and a half or so, but I just didn't know what books I should or wanted to read during the course of a reading vlog. Like, I didn't know if I wanted to make it themed with all books in the same genre, but I just decided that I'm gonna film a little reading vlog over the next 4 or 5 days or so. We're coming up onto the end of March, even though I doubt this video will see the light of day until probably close to the end of April. But taking a look at the books I'm currently reading and the books I'm hoping to read over the next handful of days, it actually feels like a great little look into the type of books I tend to gravitate towards, because it is so random. Starting with the books that I'm in the midst of reading right now. The first one is an audiobook, and it's The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie by Alan Bradley. And this, strangely enough, was recommended to me by my mechanic, and I love my mechanic. He's a great guy, and I'm absolutely adoring this audiobook. He specifically recommended the audiobook because the narrator is fantastic, and Jane Entwistle is absolutely amazing. I'm so enjoying her accent and the accents she puts on for different characters. But this is a mystery novel that's set in, I think, like the 1950s in England, to an upper class family. Our main character is a daughter of an upper class English family, and she's trying to solve the murder of this random man who was found in her cucumber patch. And I'm about a quarter of the way through, as you saw there, and I'm really enjoying it so far. The narrator is a whole lot of fun, and our main character is also so outrageous and a whole lot of fun too. And that's the beginning of a very large series, if I recall correctly. So looking forward to diving more into that audiobook. And then I have also been chipping away at the first omnibus of Gotrek and Felix by William King, which is part of the Warhammer Chronicles, which is like the fantasy subset of Warhammer 40k. This is an omnibus of 3 novels and some short stories at the end too. The first book is Trollslayer, and I'm about halfway through Trollslayer now, and I would like to finish just Trollslayer by the end of March, and then continue chipping away at this omnibus. The way the story is set up, each chapter is kind of like its own little mini story. It really feels more like a collection of short stories than a novel, if that makes sense, even though so far everything is happening chronologically. I said in my spring TBR video that Abnett is the only Warhammer author I have read anything by. So this is the first book by King I'm reading, and I'm still finding my feet with them as an author. I am enjoying the story. I'm now starting to grow and care for our characters, and it is very much a classic fantasy-esque book with a lot of classic fantasy tropes, some good and fun, and some that feel a little bit tired to me personally. But I'm excited to see how the first book, Trollslayer, is going to conclude, and I have such a hard time saying Trollslayer. But yes, Gotrek and Felix, they're a very fun duo, I will say that. Gotrek is the dwarf character here, who is very surly and absolutely ruthless when it comes to killing foe and those who have been infected by chaos. And Felix is a little bit of a reluctant hero in the sense that he's been dragged along with Gotrek and doesn't really want to be fighting for his life all of the time, but at the moment has no choice. So I'm in the midst of reading Gotrek and Felix, as well as listening to The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie. But then I'm also hoping to read Apprentice to the Villain by Nicole Maehrer before the end of the month. I hauled this book recently. It is the sequel to Assistant to the Villain, and I found the first book a little bit not hard to get into, but it did take me a little bit longer to get into because it's a very outlandish story. But oh man, I had a whole lot of fun within this world. Yes, it's outlandish. There is a frog character who speaks through like holding up these little cue cards. And at the beginning, I was just like, what is this thing doing? And then by the end, oh my God, I loved him. And I'm so excited to see more of him within Apprentice to the Villain. And I'm excited to have more world building take place that adds a little bit more depth to this story. Because for the most part, during Assistant to the Villain, I just kind of had to go with the flow and accept that things were outlandish. And once I was able to do that, that is when I had so much fun. And I'm really excited to return to these characters and this world. So hopefully I will pick this one up over the next few days. And then the only other book that I might pick up is a novella, and it is a historical romance novella, because the past week I have flown through the Brothers Sinister series by Courtney and Milan, which I spoke about in the Whiskies because I have read had read the prequel novella last year. And I had so much fun racing through the Brothers Sinister series. And the only story that I have left in that series is a little novella called Talk Sweetly to Me. So I think I'm going to pick that one up, and I'm sure it's not going to take me very long to read at all. So over the course of this reading vlog, I'm planning to read a fantasy romance, a grimdark-esque dark fantasy, a historical romance, and I'm also reading a historical mystery book. And that just kind of sums up what I gravitate towards, which is whatever is speaking to me in that moment. But hopefully with such a random collection of books, there will be something for everyone during the course of this reading vlog. So I'm going to throw the audiobook back on and make my way through the evening. I might dip into Gotrek and Felix tonight, but we will just see. That is it for me for now, so I will check back in when I have anything else to share. Since I started this reading vlog, so I figured it was time for an update. So I have made myself a cup of tea, and I wanted to chat through the reading that I did over the weekend. It was a fairly busy weekend for me, and because of that, I didn't read quite as much as I would have if I had just been staying home, but I am still really happy with the amount that I managed to read. That said, there's a cat going nuts right now. That said, I had initially thought that I was just going to do this vlog until the end of the month, March 31st, which is today, and I think I'm just going to turn it into a week-long reading vlog. because I don't want to rush myself finishing the last book that I have to start, which is Apprentice to the Villain. I'd rather take my time, read it over the next couple of evenings, and yeah, just have this be a little week-long reading vlog. So that's what I'm gonna do. But first, let's talk about the books that I did finish over the weekend. First is Talk Sweetly to Me by Courtney Milan, which is book 4.5 in the Brothers Sinister series. It's a historical romance novella, and we're following a character who is a supporting character in the previous book. I don't think he was mentioned even earlier on in the series, but he's a supporting character, and it's really short. I think 100 pages, 10 chapters, including the epilogue, and I absolutely adored it. One of the reasons that I love Milan as a historical romance author is the fact that she includes more diverse representation within her historical romance novels. I absolutely adore the subgenre, but I will be the first to admit that oftentimes that genre is just reading about a white woman meeting a white man and them falling in love. And that is not inclusive to love stories today, nor is it inclusive to love stories that took place, say, 150 years ago. So in Talk Sweetly to Me, we are following Stephen, who is an Irish Catholic man living in London, who falls in love with Rose Sweetly, who is a scientist, a mathematician. She is a computer to an astronomer in London at the time, and they're preparing for, I think it's Venus that's coming into orbit. But Rose is a Black woman, and it's very surface level because it is a novella, but there are discussions of race, and there is representation of racism within medical care within this slim short novella. And I just adore the way that Milan is able to talk incredibly eloquently about such serious, poignant, important issues so briefly within just 100 pages, and she can speak so eloquently and speak to such depth even when she does not have hundreds of pages to do so. So I read Talk Sweetly to Me over the course of the weekend. Absolutely loved it. I think I would give it, it's so hard to say because it is just a novella, not just, but it's slim. I'd say maybe 3.5 stars. It wasn't quite a 4-star read for me because there was a lot of math. In Milan's author's note, she mentioned that she took out a lot of the math. There was still a lot of math that took place on the page. High 3. It was a high 3 for sure because I absolutely adored it. But then the next book that I finished was the first book in the Gotrek and Felix omnibus, which was Trollslayer. And I've actually read a chapter of Skaven Slayer now too, but my goal was I wanted to read the first book in this omnibus before the end of the month, and I did so, which I'm very happy about. And I do recall saying earlier that I found the first book, at least, of Gotrek and Felix, Trollslayer, to be outdated and to feature some tired fantasy tropes. I did not realize that this book was first published in 2003, and that is not to excuse the tired-ish tropes that are featured in this book, but rather to provide very necessary context, because that was 20 years ago, and a lot has and can and should change within our standards for the publishing industry. The tired tropes that I found to be most prevalent within Trollslayer is just that the female characters who are introduced for a single chapter, for a single story, only exist to further along our male characters' storyline. They only exist to be saved by Felix and Gotrek. And to be fair, Gotrek and Felix are the only two characters who pass from one chapter to the next. It's constantly changing in the way that it feels very much like a short story, like I said. So it's not just female characters who are only very briefly on the page, but the gender roles within Trollslayer felt very binary, felt very dated, felt very much like it was published in the late 1990s, early 2000s. And it makes sense now that I realize this omnibus was first published in 2003. So with that little tidbit, I actually think I enjoyed Trollslayer more upon reflection than I did actually reading it. As well, Gotrek and Felix themselves I found to be very surface level characters within the first book. There are hints at deeper emotions within either character, but by and large, Gotrek is just a berserker dwarf character who just wants to rage and kill and seems inhuman to Felix. And Felix is very much a reluctant hero who regrets going on these missions with Gotrek and is only with him because he was drunk and made a promise. And there's very little character development or exploration besides that. There are a few moments where there's like a throwaway line that hints to something a little bit more, a little bit deeper with each character. So I am looking forward to finishing this omnibus over the next week or so and seeing more of that character depth from William King in writing these characters. That's what I'm hoping for. And I mentioned that one of the things I love most about Abnett's writing within the Warhammer universe is his character development and progression, and the way he makes his characters question their ideals. I'm excited to see if King does something similar, because there was the story at the very end of Trollslayer. Felix was bending a little bit more, and myself as a reader was bending a little bit more because I was having this sympathy, this empathy for a particular character. And Gotrek was the one that was like, nope, it's black and white. That's chaos. We kill chaos. We don't want it to root its way in here. So is what it is. And I'm excited to see if that dynamic between the two characters develops further. Then the only other book that I have an update on is going to be The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie by Alan Bradley. I'm just past halfway through this book now, and I'm really enjoying this audiobook. It's such an easy, fun listen to just have on in the background. I went on a bit of a drive this past weekend and I had it on in the car whilst I was driving, and I love the narrator, as I've already said. Our main character in this book is a younger girl. I don't know if her age has been mentioned, but I would put her at mid-teens, I think, if not maybe even just a little bit younger. Her name is Flavia, and because she is in her teenage years or even a preteen, some of the jumps in assumptions that she makes is just laugh out loud ridiculous funny, even though we are trying to figure out who murdered someone in her backyard. I'm really enjoying this story, and I'm not really racing to the end to figure out who the murderer is, and I'm not trying to pick up on the clues. I'm just sitting back and listening to this story because the narrator is fantastic. And I think tonight, before I go to bed, I might read a chapter or two of Apprentice to the Villain by Nicole Maehrer. But those are all of my updates for now, which has felt like a lot, but I have finished 2 books. I've had a really good past 2 days of reading and just of life and seeing family. So yeah, I'm hoping that I will have a cozy evening tonight. As you will have seen throughout the course of this little clip, Spencer has made himself quite comfy on my lap. So I think I'm going to be sitting here and reading for the foreseeable future. I will check back in when I have a few more thoughts to share, which is probably going to be when I finish my next book, but we will see. Quick reading update, because I've not spoken to camera in the last few days, but I've not read a whole lot in the last few days either until last night. It's just been a busy week so far. I had a vet appointment for my cat Minnie, and Spencer's birthday was a couple of days ago now. But last night I finished reading The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie, and I really enjoyed that book. Even though I would say it was a low stakes mystery, there was a moment towards the end where I was really confused as to how our main character, Flavia, was going to work her way out of the pickle she had ended up in. And I did find out towards the end, or relearned towards the end, that our main character is 11 years old. So she's a very young protagonist, and the book reflects that. But I had so much fun reading it. It was so enjoyable. It is part of a larger series, so I knew that she would make her way out of the scenario at the end in an all right fashion, although what a power move it would be by the author to just completely shift main characters in the second and subsequent books. This is a series that I could definitely see myself reading further into. I do think it was more enjoyable for me personally as an audiobook than it would have been as an ebook or as a physical book. I really enjoyed the experience of listening to our narrator tell this story, because she was phenomenal with her voice acting and her accent work. It was truly entertaining. So I think this is a series that I will continue on with. I feel no immediacy or urgency to dive right into the second book. The conclusion of the first book was quite well done, and it wraps things up. There are the hints of what might come next for Flavia, but there's no unanswered questions or things left up in the air. It wrapped up really nicely. So I think this is a series that I might come back to in the future when I'm just looking for an entertaining, lighter audio book. So I finished The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie last night, and I also began Apprentice to the Villain by Nicole Maehrer, which is the last book that I'm going to read for this reading vlog. And I did read almost half of it last night. This book has really short chapters, and it has progressed even quicker than I expected it to. We are already on to a task that I didn't know was going to be central to this plot. So I've been pleasantly surprised by how things have progressed, and there is a fine line for me as a reader between outlandish fun and outlandish too ridiculous to even enjoy. And I think Maehrer does an incredible job on staying on the outlandish fun side of that line. I've said this before, but when I began this series with Assistant to the Villain, it took me some time to orient myself into this world and orient and accept the outlandish nature of this series. But she writes with such humor, and I found myself last night genuinely laughing out loud at certain parts. So I'm really looking to diving back into this afternoon, maybe tonight. And I read the first half so quickly that the likelihood of me finishing this book within the next 24 hours or so is pretty high. So I will update you all when I finish Apprentice to the Villain with my final thoughts and conclude this reading vlog. But for now, yes, I am going to dive back in to this book. It is finally time to wrap up this reading vlog because I finished Apprentice to the Villain. But first, to recap all of the books that I managed to read over the course of the last week and a few days. The first was Talk Sweetly to Me by Courtney Milan, which was a very quick, fast-paced historical romance novella. I loved the representation within this quick read, and I also loved the way that it concluded the Brothers Sinister series, which is a series that I absolutely enjoyed and sped through so quickly over about a week and a half. So really enjoyed Talk Sweetly to Me. Then I finished listening to The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie by Alan Bradley. And again, this was a really enjoyable read/listen. I loved the narrator for this audiobook, and I found the plot and the characters to be really entertaining, quite funny. This was a low stakes murder mystery, I would say, and we're following along with an 11-year-old protagonist who sees herself as this detective, and she is a little mini scientist with all of these experiments that she's brewing up in her attic room. I think I will continue on with this series in its audio book format because I really enjoyed, like I have already said so many times, this narrator, and I think this is going to be just like a really easy, fun listen as I'm pottering and puttering about. Then I also finished the first book in the first omnibus of Gotrek and Felix, which was Trollslayer, and I am still reading Skaven Slayer. I have not progressed very far in the second book within this omnibus, just because I prioritized finishing this reading vlog. But as I continue on with Gotrek and Felix, I am enjoying the characters more and I'm enjoying the premise more. This feels more like a collection of short stories than necessarily a larger novel with one storyline, because each chapter features its own little story. Even though these events are taking place in chronological order, there is an enemy that is introduced at the beginning of each chapter. There's a conflict that arises. There is a battle sequence that takes place really close to the end of the chapter, very quick paced with a lot of build up. And then for the most part, that conflict is resolved within the space of that chapter. And then they go and face another foe in the next chapter. So I would say that I am enjoying Gotrek and Felix more now that I've progressed a little bit farther into their journey than I was enjoying it, say, at the very, very beginning. Then finally, Apprentice to the Villain by Nicole Maehrer. As I believe I have already said, this book progressed really quickly past what I thought was going to be the crux of this novel. And that's a good thing. I really enjoyed being a little bit surprised with where the plot moved and what the characters were up to. And I will say that with the conclusion of Apprentice, I think I'm really invested in what's going to happen next with the plot. Throughout Assistant to the Villain, like I've said, it was really more of a character-driven read for me personally. There were larger plot machinations taking place, but I was really interested in this storyline for the characters, for the banter, and for their interactions. And that still stayed the case throughout Apprentice, but I really became invested and interested in what was taking place and the larger framework of this fantasy realm and how our characters are going to react to this type of prophecy that has been spoken. I really cannot wait to read the next installment in this series, which I think is coming out this summer, and I'll absolutely be reading the next installment before the end of the year, I would say, because I loved the little plot twist that took place at the end of this novel. And there were breadcrumbs and there were hints throughout the entirety of this book that that is where things were going to go. But I think Maehrer did a really incredible job of taking that last little pivot right at the very end. I really enjoyed Apprentice. I'd say this was probably, again, maybe like a 3.75 star read, maybe a 4-star read. I did only just finish this, and sometimes I do need to sit with a read for a little bit longer before I decide on where I think it falls on my scale of rating. And my scale of rating is such an arbitrary scale. So I enjoyed this book. I enjoyed all of the books that I read throughout this vlog, even though I think most of them would probably be within that 3.5, 3.75, low 4-star read. There were no standout 5-star reads throughout the course of the last week and a half, but I read 4 books, 3 books, 1 novella that I greatly, greatly enjoyed. I had so much fun filming some live reactions over the course of the last week and a bit. Hopefully it will not be another 5 months before I film a reading vlog, because I really, really enjoy this format of video. I think it might be my favorite, or one of my favorites at the very least. But for now, this is going to be it for me. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I will be back soon with a new one. Bye for now.